Episode 5 of WandaVision just came out for us as of recording this, and it was full of crazy surprises and new information. I mean, there was mainly one crazy surprise, but new information
and reveal.
Yeah, and so we wanted to make a video sort of discussing Mephisto, because before WandaVision even started airing, people were saying, "Oh, Mephisto's going to be the villain," and we were kind of like, "Why would Mephisto be the villain?" We didn't really know, and so we did a little bit of research, and we found out why Mephisto,
is likely
going to be the villain, and so that's what this video is going to be about. It's also going to be theorizing about how and why Mephisto is implicating Wanda in this whole...
Trying to use her.
Yeah, trying to use her in this whole WandaVision hex sort of illusion, and what Mephisto's goal may be going forward, based on what we saw in this last episode. And so we'll just start off by saying who Mephisto is. So we consulted our great book encyclopedia, and while it's a bit outdated, it did give us the information we needed. We heard that Mephisto was kind of this person people were throwing around, so we looked him up in our great book. That's not him.
Books! We found this handsome devil.
Ho ho ho. And so it gave us the information that we assume people went off of in theorizing that Mephisto was going to be the bad guy, and that's that in a storyline in the comics, Mephisto, I guess some of his soul fragments were out and about, and Wanda actually took those soul fragments and created twin sons. And I guess it was kind of based on trailers of Wanda being pregnant or having babies or whatever.
You saw the bit in the trailer.
Yeah.
Spit out the binkies.
Yeah, and so people knew that she was going to have these kids. And so people went, okay, the storyline where Wanda made her kids was with Mephisto. She used... Needless to say, it's sort of this uncanny connection. Uncanny X-Men, not uncanny. Needless to say,
it's a pretty direct connection.
It's a very direct connection to what is happening in WandaVision right now. Just a little side note is that people also noticed that another thing that Wanda created in that same time period, possibly also using Mephisto's soul. I'm not familiar with it.
On that part.
She reanimated her previous mentor,
Agatha
Harkness. And if you kind of just smush that all together, you take Agatha Harkness, you get Agnes. And so that kind of leads into the idea, and something that we've suspected since the beginning, which is that Agnes, our friendly neighbor from WandaVision, is actually sort of the main vessel that Mephisto is using.
Whether she is Mephisto or is just kind of the vessel that he's puppeting through, we don't know. But she's definitely connected in some way, and I think it doesn't take much. If you watch the show, she's weird, and she's definitely connected.
She knows a little bit more.
She knows too much.
Yeah, she seems to kind of be driving things more than any of the other
especially
citizens.
in this most recent
episode. But anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. Mephisto is this ancient interdimensional being, and he often presents himself as the devil to take advantage of humans, because that's a form that people will recognize and be afraid of, or sort of resonate with. Why did you say that so weird? Resonate.
Because when people resonate with something, it's usually good, but people don't tend to be like, I'm hip with the devil, yo.
Mephisto is he makes deals with desperate people, essentially for their souls.
Yeah. Give some context to that. He's the guy that has made the Ghost Riders. Very desperate people, often dying, on death's door, says, "Hey, I'll help you live a bit longer if you do this for me." So that's the kind of guy we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's the kind of a guy, gal. It might be a gal in the MCU being that we're dealing with here. And so we've got a person who can possibly travel through dimensions. We've got a person who makes deals with desperate people. Those are the things that we kind of need to remember for this portion of our theory. And so going forwards with what we said at the top of the video, how and why are they implicating Wanda in this? So, like we said, deals with desperate people. Wanda, by the end of Endgame...
And we know this is right after.
And we know that this is very soon after... would be in a very vulnerable and desperate place. She you know, even before then, she was like...
Yeah.
She was...
Her brother died a couple years ago. She blew up a bunch of people in Africa.
Yeah.
And then she killed the love of her life, only for him to be immediately brought back and then killed. And then she was subsequently then killed, brought back, immediately thrown into the biggest battle of all time. Exploded a couple times. Then the leader of the Avengers was then killed himself. And then they went to his funeral, and then she went and stole her love's corpse. Not a great place to be.
Wanda is, you know, she's been through a lot, and so she would be very susceptible to, say, an interdimensional, you know, person who is known
as a friend,
known for taking advantage of people. And so we're thinking that, you know, whether Wanda actually, you know, met Mephisto and made a deal and was like, yeah, I want to accept this, or if she was kind of just lured into this scenario, we think that Mephisto sort of created more of the physical aspects, you know, like the barrier of the hex, and kind of lured Wanda here and was like, here's a perfect world where you can have friends and family and be accepted by the world and not feared by all the people around you. And, you know, there are definitely things where Wanda is to blame here. She's not completely absolved, even if Mephisto...
We definitely think that she is the one controlling the people.
Yeah.
You know, because we know for a fact that that's in her power set.
Yeah, but there are other aspects that are not in her power set, you know, like physically changing the house and houses. You know,
and the drone coming in, and the people, the B-Man.
Yeah, you know, physically changing Monica's outfit. You know, those are things that Wanda has never been able to do,
and we don't think that she is able to do even now.
Yeah, we think that there is another person behind this. It's not just Wanda. You know,
evidence of that is again in this most recent episode when Vision is confronting her. She blatantly says, I don't know how any of this started. And while Vision isn't believing her, I think that that's kind of a moment where us as the audience
get to see,
you know, while she is holding back on a lot of information, I think that is something that is true.
And so Wanda is kind of lured into this perfect world. And I don't know how the people of Westview kind of became under her control, whether she brought them from somewhere else or they were kind of just waiting, like trapped in the hex for her to, you know, manipulate.
I personally have been kind of thinking that her end of the bargain, if there was a bargain, or just kind of her end to get this life was, hey, bring me the people to populate this town, potentially, because as again pointed out in this most recent episode, there's no children there, and I think that is just kind of showing us the bar at which Wanda's willing to go. You know, she is taking these people to populate her village, but she's not willing to kidnap and control children.
To kind of go on the other side of that, what I think is that maybe she was led to Westview, and then only then did the barrier go up. Everything sort of became all, you know, 1970s. Weirdy. Yeah. She then, you know, I don't know if she sort of was manipulated to do this at first, or was, given some form of instruction, but she then went along with it and controlled everybody and matched all of the people's personalities with the time period. And I think that, there may be a little bit more sinister of an explanation for why there are no children. I don't know what exactly that will be, if they're all just sort of empty drones standing in a shed while, Wanda executes her what she wants. Maybe it took the souls of all of those children to create hers. Maybe she's sort of swapping out the various ages of the kids for when they're getting up, and those are all different kids that are being changed.
They made sure to say that the kids are hers.
Yeah, and that's true. And so just by the way that Vision said, "Why aren't there any kids, Wanda?" It was very sinister.
It was very deliberate to point out that this is something not good going on.
But yeah, we digress. We think that, she was given this scenario, and, whether or not she made a deal or not, she decided this world is better than the outside.
And we see that deliberately in episode 5. She comes out and says, "Hey, leave me alone. This is where I want to be.
I have everything I want here. All you need to do is leave me alone."
Yeah.
Because that's all she wants. And I think she knows there's something bad about it.
Yes.
She knows that she probably shouldn't be controlling these people.
I think evidence of that is when we see the dead Vision in the episode before.
Her facade is starting to
her
to
Lady
crack.
Macbeth moment.
And so she, I think, brought the Vision by her own accord. I don't know if that was part of Mephisto's plan, because as we see in this last episode, when Vision kind of interferes with the narrative that Agnes/Mephisto wants to tell, she just shuts it down. She just says, "Let's try that again." And I think I get the babies in this scene. That's what's supposed to happen.
And the other thing is to point out there is that was not a case of Wanda controlling the show. The other parts in WandaVision, when we do see her deliberately changing and controlling the show, when the Bee-Man comes, or when the glass breaks, or when she throws out Monica, we see these scenarios from the outside and the view of the show, and sometimes in the show when it skips and she rewinds it and changes it. This was not one of those cases. When Agnes snapped out and said, "Hey, you want me to hold the kids, let's try that one again," Wanda seemed almost just as taken off guard as Vision was, where she was confused. She didn't rewind the show and fix that. The person in control there was Agnes. She was changing how things are working and saying, "You want me to hold the babies," and putting ideas in Wanda's head and saying what she wants to do.
Yeah, and it seems that Vision is not as easily tricked as anybody else, and I don't think that Wanda is doing as much manipulation in his brain. I think she might be blocking out certain memories, but he's definitely an outlier when it comes to people who are trapped in the illusion.
Yeah, another thing to point out with that is that the kids are also like
the
that.
Kids as well, and so I don't know if we're going to touch too much on what the kids are and what that means. In the comic book storyline, they became reabsorbed into Mephisto because they were fragments of his soul, and they were essentially destroyed. And that sort of drove Wanda mad. But we don't know what that will become in this show.
They were also joined, they were also young heroes in the comics. I don't know if it was the same as that one or separate times, but they grew up to be powered.
Yeah, eventually they were kind of recreated through a big event. But that's
for a later time.
That's for a later time. Going back to what Mephisto's goal might be. In this latest episode, like we said, Agnes is really pushing the narrative in this episode especially. She comes over, says, "Okay, I'm going to take care of the babies now." And after Agnes is done handling them, that is actually when they do age up.
Yes.
So I wonder if she is sort of in control of the...
That was something that I was posing before. If she is maybe the one controlling the aging process.
And
of
if they are fragments of her soul, then, that makes sense.
And also, again, just to point out, that was a very eerie kind of scene where she's there just kind of ignoring the fact that these kids just grew and just sitting in their on their counter,
Yeah.
just kind of hanging out,
Yeah,
and just unfazed by the whole thing, and just very, very weird.
Yeah, and kind of it was like she was trying to do the old, like, when a lesson is learned in the old TV shows, she's like, kids, you can't control them, or whatever she did say. And it was just sort of like she was making this some sort of, funny lesson, even though it's something that she should have been concerned about. And so she's pushing this narrative. It could have been her that aged up these kids. She was there when it happened, both times that it happened.
And almost the third time.
Yeah, and so then the dog comes. The boys find the dog, and then she all of a sudden is there, and Vision says, with exactly the thing that we need, and the boys want to name the dog Sniffy, but then on cue, the dog, goes by the outlet, and it zaps, and she goes, how about Sparky? And so she's making sure things happen exactly the way that she wants them to. So everything is she's pushing this narrative with the boys and the dogs, and, them, being old enough to care for this dog, caring for this dog, and then eventually is there when the dog dies, and is actually the one to deliver this body.
We don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
She tells us one thing, but with this strange person we're dealing with, it could have been any number.
Yeah. And so then the boys then urge her to bring this dog back to life. Urge Wanda to bring the dog back to life.
Yeah.
And Agnes goes, you can do that? And there are a few times when they cut back to her during that, where she's just kind of looking and waiting, essentially for something to happen. So what we think is that Agnes / Mephisto was sort of creating this situation in which it would always end up with Wanda potentially resurrecting
Wanda
something.
in the position to bring something back to
life. Or, at least planting the idea of, could you possibly resurrect something if you tried, We think that maybe that's Mephisto's goal, is to maybe merging
their own power
with Wanda's, or even just with Wanda's, kind of testing her limits, trying to unlock the key to resurrection.
What it could be is maybe, I'm thinking of something while we're filming, is Wanda could have met Mephisto and had this whole kind of, the luring situation could have played out after she liberated the Vision. And the whole Mephisto thing could have come after she maybe reanimated him. And Mephisto seeing, hey, you can bring somebody back.
Right.
Now I want you to use that for me.
Yeah. That could very well be.
It could have been either way around. But kind of the tangent that I'm going off on there is Vision's back. And so with our kind of thread of resurrection, we know for a fact that Vision's back, but we don't think that she's just puppeting his corpse around. The theory that we have currently is that when the Mind Stone was removed from the Vision, that's when he was done, And so Wanda's powers being from the Mind Stone, we think that potentially if there's enough Mind Stone energy or just influence from that same power input into him, then that could potentially be enough to have him up and kicking again.
Yeah, especially if there was kind of, obviously his head's kind of caved in, but it's relatively minimal damage. And so if it's really just the power source that's missing, Wanda kind of giving that and just saying, maybe you don't have a little bit of memory, I think maybe that's all she's doing. And so I think that's actually a good, idea, is that maybe Mephisto saw her bring the Vision back to life.
Bring the Vision back to life.
But the Vision's a machine, so it's obviously different. And but yeah, we think that because obviously for someone who is essentially the devil that you make deals with, the power of resurrection would be a very valuable thing.
Yes.
For them to use in making deals with people. And so we think that whether it was inspired by the Vision or not, the resurrection of the Vision or not, or if that was sort of one step in the plan of putting that idea into her head, we think that that's kind of what Mephisto's goal is going forwards. And the one last sort of piece to that is how Mephisto is sort of pushing that going forwards
Yeah.
may involve Pietro, because he was recast, and we'll get into that in another video. But regardless of that, this is her brother who once was dead.
Yeah.
And so, this is sort of a pseudo resurrection to maybe put in the idea of you could bring your brother back.
Yeah, and I think that it may be pushed even further with potentially killing this brother again, and then pushing Wanda's limits of, you wouldn't bring back the dog, but wouldn't you wish you had brought back your brother the first time?
So now
you can do it this time. And I think that is probably where we'll see that.
And maybe like akin to in the comics when Mephisto just reabsorbed the boys, maybe that's how that will be the final test that Mephisto does, is will you resurrect your boys?
Yeah.
And it could get really dark and really sad, but
it's kind of this escalation. And like you were saying, is if this person who makes deals with desperate people has the ability to bring people back from the dead, that is a very powerful tool that he will then now have of, hey, you person, you want this to happen, I'll bring this person back if you give me your soul.
Yeah, exactly.
And then Wanda doesn't have to know about that part. She's happy in her Westview. Mephisto needs to bring somebody back, pops over to Westview, hey, help me bring this back. And because another thing with that is, in the comics, that was part of the deal that Mephisto made with Spider-Man, was to kind of bring people back. And so it's a common thread with him.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of our theory. Why it's likely, why Mephisto is likely the one who is kind of pulling the strings here.
We're not saying that it is 100%.
Yeah.
This is just our theory.
Yeah, and like we think, because that wasn't our idea initially, people picked up on that, and we just went, yeah, there are some very similar.
This is us. This is us. Running with the idea that Mephisto is the one pulling the strings.
Yeah, exactly. And so we think that they lured Wanda in to this illusion and are kind of taking advantage of her grief and her vulnerability, and trying to create the perfect world and a scenario in which they can take even further advantage of her by exploiting her powers, possibly to bring people back from the dead. Yeah, and so we're going to have a couple of little mini theories coming out here. And so something that we mentioned earlier that we just kind of touched on was that some of the powers and the abilities that are going on in Westview are not quite in line with what Wanda can do. And so we have another theory that could possibly explain Mephisto's origins and powers within the MCU, that could possibly even be tied to Infinity Stones. And so if that interests you, then check that out. And if you like this video, if you agree with our theory, if you thought it was a good theory, let us know in the comments. If you disagree, let us know in the comments. If you have a theory of your own, let us know in the comments.
Yeah, and those videos should come up on these ones or in the
iCard or wherever. And so yeah, we hope you liked it. If you did, like it, maybe subscribe as well, and yeah, check out these other videos.